Multiplayer pack?
Yeah, they had multiplayer. I didn't really do it for that, but yeah, because they had the big patch, the third of a couple of other big patches as well, and it was interesting enough that I wanted to go back and play around with it.
Yeah, I feel like I need to just do a fresh start.
I hadn't really ever played it before, so it was pretty fun to go back, and I might mess around with it a little bit more. I really wish that it had VR support. If any game seems like
Mm.
it should have it, that one kind of should. But all right, I
Actually,
don't think
maybe I
it
don't need
does.
a fresh start. It's not like I did any of the features like base building. I mean, it's
Could
not
be
like I
right.
lose
The
anything by
the
leaving
base building
Aaron, right?
feature is actually super well integrated. All right, gonna
Features.
go put my contacts in real quick.
Sure.
So just keep the conversation going so people know that we're here and we're about to get started. All right,
Oh,
All
be
all
ready.
right.
right.
With
We got
short
2 minutes.
notice and all, I could be in some serious trouble. Let's see here. Let's go through the show notes. Oh man, yeah. But I was telling
Oh,
Bridger, I picked up Total War on a Humble Bundle sale, a Total War Warhammer, and I've just now started playing it, so I have sunk a ton of hours into it. But I did download the
I keep seeing you
yeah,
on Steam playing that. Looks like you're
yeah.
having a good time.
I am. I finally figured it out. I was overextending far too much strategically early on.
Nice.
Hmm. And I'm eating not quite, but almost ice cream, a Halo Top. If you've not tried it, I suggest it. The macros are generally amazing for what you get. Mentioned last week I got the 1100 pound club.
No,
Yep, yep.
congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Now I just need
That's that's a hell of a title right there.
to. Well, it was a good feeling to not realize I had hit it until I sat down and punched my numbers and say, ah, shit, there it is. Uh,
And that happened.
yeah,
Yeah.
who knew? But yeah, it was surprising. But now I'm trying to get. If you ever go to strengthstandards.co, you can punch in your 1 rep max lifts for squat, bench, deadlift, and
Hmm.
it will tell you where you are as far as strength athletes go. And so right now I'm about halfway between advanced and elite for my all of my lifts, and I'm working. I basically I just need to cut weight to get to elite. Is what it comes down to. As I'm
Changes the
sitting,
proportion or
yep,
percentage or whatever. Okay.
yeah. So for a 185 pound athlete, I am this, but for a 160 pound athlete, I would be this. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
And over elite, you become an ant. That's
After elite, you become Hercules.
that's fair.
After a little final definition thing. So if
Which
I ever,
Hercules, though?
it's a good, I think they're thinking more Kevin Sorbo than half son of Zeus, but
Gotcha. I mean, Kevin Sorbo.
mm,
That's respectable.
yeah, oh yeah,
All right,
and
so
then
we are going to get ready. Looks like the volume level's good. I'm turning on the alternate audio record right now,
okay, we were just discussing
and
Kevin Sorbo. Your thoughts?
Yeah.
fucking loved Hercules and Hercules in space. Hercules in space does not get
Hercules in
enough credit.
space was a thing.
Andromeda.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Hmm.
I call it Hercules in space, but
No,
it was
you're not
officially
wrong.
called Andromeda.
Oh, and Rich Piana has died.
I feel like I should know who that is.
No, you shouldn't. He was a guy who I would say he chased body dysmorphia into the grave. But
Ah.
at 46 years of age, he died of he died in a coma induced by his cocaine usage. But no,
Oh.
it's so. But see, the thing is, you ever look for a picture? Actually, do a Google search,
Wow.
find a picture. Rich Piana. The
That's
man
something.
was very open about his steroid usage, and he had a lot of followers in the bodybuilding community and a lot of detractors in every other community that I could find. So, but better for
All right,
worse, the man, bigger by the day, has died.
all right. We are at 7:02. Not too bad. You guys ready to go?
Sure.
Lock and load.
Let me update this to the correct. Next date is 9/24.
Let's just do the intro with me eating.
Just chewing
And I
noises.
Yeah,
See how
no,
many
that
it's
sounds
people we
good.
can
great.
drive off.
It's perfect. I love it. I mean, it's right on time.
Left screen. There it is. Full screen eating. Welcome. All right. Here
Hello.
we
Welcome to the
go.
show, everybody. Good to have you here.
Works real well. Here we go. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network. I am Bridger from Legacy Fleet, and today we are talking about all the great news from Gamescom. We have seen quite a bit from the show floor and the presentation, and we're here to talk about it. Along with me, I have my co-hosts. Again, I am Bridger, and with me is Gray and Calathulu. Welcome, guys.
Good evening.
So, Bridger, I have a problem. There was good news from Gamescom? No, I'm kidding. Actually, it was a very, very awesome
amazing.
show.
I mean,
if you've not seen,
it was amazing. But what I wanted was the Apple style announcement. Look here, all the great things you can see in 3.0, and by the way, you can get it right now. Like that's the announcement I wanted. But no, it was unrealistic, really. But okay,
No,
anyway.
Really, we got a Samsung-style announcement. We got a bunch of role-playing.
More Windows 95 comes to you than
That's
iOS.
exactly it. We got a whole bunch of role-playing. We got some people who are talking about things in slightly unconvincing ways. Then we saw a whole bunch of features, and the presentation lasted longer than people wanted it to.
Wow, you nailed it.
That is it.
Samsung.
And then I ordered a Note 8.
But I have to give them credit. They showed a commitment to not wasting backer dollars. They didn't waste any money on voice actors. That is
very important. Yes, I feel as an investor, quote unquote,
or on a presentation company.
Yeah, or even just one consultant.
They
just
even got
call
somebody
me. I'll fly out and veto all the things that you want to do. Okay, anyway. So we're going to get to that. Just a reminder, we do record the show live every Sunday at 7 p.m. Next show is going to be on 9/24. It's always the last Sunday, not every Sunday, but the last Sunday of each month. So September 24th. Feedback at talesofshow.com is how you can get a hold of us. Send us an email, feedback at talesofshow, if you have any questions that you want us to discuss or anything else like that. So let's jump right into it. We're going to try to take things in chronological order that happened since the last time that we talked.
And there is a lot.
There's quite a bit. We've had a couple of around the verses, which I like to sort of go through and find out little nuggets of valuable information in there. The first one that I saw was making the MOBA glass matter, and that was actually really interesting.
MOBA glass or Moby glass?
Moby glass?
Well,
all right, Moby
is this
glass.
GIF?
No, we can't do it.
No, man, no. But I mean, one of my complaints with the Moby glass or MOBA glass, although MOBA would have an A, so bad grade. Bad.
Must be Moby.
Moby glass matter was that it always felt so gimmicky to me from the old demos we've seen of it so far and all of that. So I was glad to see that around the verse, and they're actually addressing that complaint.
Yeah. The biggest
Finally.
The biggest piece. Well, yeah. The biggest piece that I saw from this was essentially they had the problem rendering three-dimensional items on a 2D surface within the engine, and that is something that they have just recently solved. So now they're able to render something in 3D within that 2D plane of the MOBA glass, or make it like a hologram, which is they showed off when you can see them looking at the MOBA glass and seeing like the star map or the system map coming out of their MOBA glass like a hologram. So that was all really cool.
I'm not 100% sure on this, but it feels like the same technological limitations were causing problems with that were with CryEngine not rendering real-time reflection.
Yeah, which makes sense. But my problem, I heard that sentence too, and I thought, wait, so you got a 3D engine that's having trouble rendering 3D images to a 2D surface when the entire point of the damn thing is to, in real life, render 3D images to a 2D surface.
Yeah, but you have to do it like exhibit style. Like, yo, dog, I heard you like 3D rendered to 2D, so I put some 3D rendered to 2D inside your 3D rendered to 2D. I took that joke way too far. I just should have stopped at exhibit. Anyway.
You could have done that, or you could have gone with it's deception.
Oh, well, okay. When I have a choice, I always go to exhibit. All right, so the other thing that we saw was outposts and environmental storytelling. They basically showed us how they made the part 2 of how they make cool outposts on these various planets and have the artists write their own things. And they talked about how they had a giant bottleneck where sort of making these bespoke situations were problematic because the artist would have to keep track of all of the little pieces that say this object is inside that as object, which is inside this base, which is on this moon, which is in this star system, etc. And you can't ask the artist to do that because that's not their thing. And they're
Yes.
not going to be good at it. So they had to make it so that it would all sort of do that stuff automatically. And they've done it. So now everything
Yeah.
should be faster. And I'm kind of getting tired of saying, well, now they've finished making the
Mm.
tools that are going to make everything faster so everything can
It's
come faster
almost
now.
like we're watching the game at the very inception of the systems.
It's like we're
Yeah,
watching development
it's just
live.
like that, isn't it?
It's really uncanny. It's like we're watching development. Yeah.
So,
So so that was pretty
so we're
interesting.
all
The
yeah.
burn down is a very interesting concept. Like, let's get everybody excited
Yep.
about how little progress we've made since last week. Where they went from 1 week where they said, yeah, we have 77 things blocking us from releasing 3.0, and then the next week they're like, yeah, now we have 82 things. Like, you fool!
But we solved
What
10.
have you done?
Well,
We
and
solved 10 and got 15 new ones.
It all
Sandy
goes
started.
back. Yeah, it all
Yeah,
goes back to the
Sandy.
same that you have with software development. You'll have
Yes,
things that crop up, and then something that crops up in that 10 might eliminate 40 other problems.
actually, Gray.
It's yeah.
There is an
What?
old saying along these lines, and I'm going to
Oh
sing it
no.
for everyone here in the chat. It's a song. It goes with software development. 99 little bugs. Oh, no, 127. 99 little bugs on the wall. 99 little bugs. Take one down. Patch it around. 127 little bugs on the wall.
Yep, that's
Yep, that's
I've
exactly
been
it.
told that's how that works.
And-
Now, Gray, I don't know if you can provide. I know you do software engineering in your profession as well. One of the things they mentioned in this ATV from 2 weeks ago is that 3.0 has officially been split off onto its own branch within the company.
yes.
The branch
Yes.
being, a separate code base so that it can be worked on separately from the main back database.
Mhm.
Now,
The
that
master
sounds like an
branch.
impressive and important milestone. Is that something that's very that is as notable as I think it is?
Um.
It,
To put it simply, probably not. Um.
Dang.
Really, when you split something off to its own branch, you're trying to isolate it so you can make changes that you don't necessarily want in the main, or you want to start making changes to the main in ways that would disrupt changes to your current release project.
and
So
yeah.
the likelihood is what's happening is they're starting work on 3.1 elements, or at
Hmm.
least some of their developers are starting work on 3.1 elements that have nothing to do with 3.0 functionality, because 3.0 functionality is mostly in the putting out fires phase.
Yeah.
Those 3.1 folks need to be able to check in somewhere and specifically say, okay, I found these things, I changed these things, let's start doing work on them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they need to be able to check it in for the purpose of building. So the likelihood is that 3.0 being in its own branch is being done for the purpose of creating a stable client for us. When they're talking about all these blockers, the likelihood is that they're trying to work them out in the 3.0 branch while still possibly introducing changes for 3.1 in the master,
Gotcha.
or in the path to the master, as the case may be, since this will be sitting off to the side.
Okay. And another very important piece that if anybody was watching closely, they would have seen in the most recent Burn Down 3, we got this handy dandy chart. And for those of you playing the audio game version, this is a chart showing that on, let's see, this would be August 4th, they had 90 blockers. And as of, what is it, 24th of August, they had around 68 blockers. And if we just extrapolate this down, it'll be done in 2 months. Right? Is that how
Yep.
that works? We
That
get it
just
in
reminds
November.
me.
That's
That
not
just
how that works.
it is a trend line. But
If
that
you have
reminds
enough
me of
data, if you have enough data points, it could work that way. But
it
we'd need
could.
a couple years
Yeah,
of
we need
data.
a lot more data points. But that reminds me of that famous Simpsons line with Disco Stew. Here's the disco record sales year end 1978. And if this trend continues, said in the year 2005.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, this part of this goes back to actually, splitting the branch off and dealing with various issues for stability. These are blocking issues. These are things that
Yep.
they see as all of these things need to be fixed before they're comfortable with calling it a live release, or most of them need to be fixed before you'd have a beta release or whatever you want to call it for this particular patch. So the likelihood is that a lot of these are intertwined. they're related. But at the same time, when you're working in Agile and you're working on a board, you try to divvy everything out. You want everything to be in its own little story, so to speak, its own little issue listing. Because if you don't do that, and then it turns out that there actually is separation between problem A and problem B, you haven't actually defined the problem yet. So it's possible that closing one thing closes 10. It's
Hmm.
possible that closing one thing only closes one.
And opens
Um,
3.
yeah, that's exactly it. There really is no way to know from the chart how to extrapolate that amount of information, which is probably one of the reasons that CIG felt safe sharing it initially, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people who, I mean, honestly seem to be lay people, not necessarily software engineers, are intent on making trend lines, and they're going to have a real bad time when things just start
Who you
Or,
calling
moving.
today?
or I'm just speculating. If we sit here and say, no, there's no way that that trend line is accurate enough times, fate will intervene to make us look like fools, and we will get it on November 4th.
Richard, there is a stronger tell than fate, and we heard it here. It is the dick punching machine. Do not tempt the dick punching machine with your talk of fate, or things
That's
working
true.
out, or
That is true.
releasing a scheduled date to have a drop on. It will
Fair
only
enough.
go poorly
Fair
for
enough.
you and me.
I I feel like there is probably a reason that they said that they were aiming for mid-September, and I don't think that was pure bravado or optimism in this case. I would be curious to see what the charts start looking like in the coming weeks and
Hmm.
what issues are actually left.
So I think one of the things that Sandy mentioned in the Gamescom presentation is that over the last year, they have squashed, or was it the entire development? I can't remember
11,
what 11,000 was the
200,
number.
yeah, 240 days,
Eleven
11,500 and
thousand.
something bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I may not be a computer scientist, but I have a new idea about how to fix this problem.
Don't have
Maybe if
11,000
they get
bugs?
it right the first time, they won't
Right.
have to go back and fix all
Ah,
these bugs.
I've never
Clearly,
even
they just need to
considered that.
fire everybody and hire better programmers. Is that how that works?
I think there's a whole
Sure.
subreddit that you could probably go host to about that.
Okay.
R
Anyway,
programming.
moving on. Let's talk about
Just
Gamescom
just go
itself.
chat with those programmers. They'd love to hear it.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. I could tell them all how to do their jobs better. So let's
programmers.
all go to the Gamescom. So there was actually a couple of different places you could get some information here. There was basically a Q&A with Aaron Roberts and Chris Roberts. Aaron Roberts is Chris's
Mhm.
brother, heading up the Squadron 42 development in the UK studio. And there were a couple of very juicy and interesting questions I wanted to pull out of there and discuss. One of them was, I believe, for Aaron Roberts, how many players in a server are you targeting for 3.0 release? And he said, I don't want to go into numbers right now, but as many as we can, we will exponentially increase afterwards, unquote. How?
Bear in mind,
How?
exponential
Exponential? Geometric? What?
can mean a lot of things.
Yeah. No,
I
it
mean,
can't, actually. It means a very specific thing. It means a damn hockey stick. I learned this in high school. All right? It's all about the hockey stick.
But he didn't give you the logarithmic scale you're doing your exponential extrapolation on.
Ah, so
True.
it could be a very long hockey stick.
Yes, exactly right. It can
Damn.
exponentially increase towards infinity if you give them about 40 to 60,000 years.
Right, like the human population, where it just very slowly increases until about,
Until about
1850.
5 years ago. Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, that's certainly an interesting description, but I guess it would have to, right? If they're trying to build an MMO, and you want everybody on the same. I guess what he's talking about is being in the same shard or the same server,
Yeah.
the same universe. It would have to
Yeah.
exponentially increase if you've got millions of people playing. I assume he doesn't mean a given small area is going to hold an exponentially increasing number of ships that can fight and play together. I'm guessing that is across the entire area.
So the easiest way for it to scale would be instancing or shards.
Yeah.
I mean, straightforward. That's the easiest approach. We've all encountered it in gaming. If you played Guild Wars, if you've played any modern MMO for that matter,
World of
uh,
Warcraft had different realms.
yep, you've seen it. My guess is he's talking about instancing, or it wouldn't be notable.
Maybe.
And if it's in the instance, the exponential may be an overstatement. Not that I'd ever accuse a Roberts of making an overstatement.
Hey, it's not Peter Molyneux here, all right?
That's a good point.
He,
But I can see where, hey, initially we're going to have a release of 16 people per shard or per instance, and then we're going to get it to 32. On a computer scale, that is an order of magnitude.
that's true.
But then you
And
get,
and
or
they did mention,
yeah.
I think we talked about it about 3 or 4 months ago, where they did the special new like burst netcode transmission of data. I don't remember what it's called. It was like a compression of the data that was necessary for each
Hmm.
individual client, so that it was not sending as much unnecessary data to the client, and that raised the server tick rate from 10 to 30 FPS, which is a pretty significant increase. Now, most
10 to 30
players,
ticks.
I'm sorry.
10 to 30 ticks. That's how many times the server
Correct. That's why,
refreshes.
yeah, tick rate is
Yeah.
what I said.
FPS is very different.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
they said FPS in one of the interviews, but I assumed they
Yeah.
meant tick rate.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Yeah, goes back to the layperson thing. Nobody knows
Yeah.
what tick rate
sure.
means.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but I mean, ideally, you'd want to see it at 60. I think we could all live at 45 if that's what the final game winds up going at. But
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Overwatch still at 30?
I thought they boosted Overwatch to
Okay.
60 a while ago, and
It's a
everybody
good
was real
question.
happy.
Let me find that out.
I remember it was. I mean,
It
I
was
was.
at
I
30 when
remember
they
hearing a
released.
debate about it at a time, and I thought
Yeah.
that they had wound up, working on it and eventually increasing the tick rate to 60. The tick
Yeah.
rate being, for those of you not in the know, how many times a second a server updates the game state.
Yeah.
Which is very
Yeah.
important because if it's too low, it can feel like you have lag, even if
Mhm.
your connection to the server is very strong, especially for games with split-second reaction times and things like that. So anyway,
Yeah, it looks like they did indeed go up to 60 or 63.
Oh, okay.
Was their improvement? That was last year.
yeah.
Ah,
So
which
the next question I wanted to discuss is somebody was asked 3.0's procedural moons, birth of survival mechanics in SC, oxygen, stamina, etc. What else is planned for survival? Food, water? And then the answer, quote, not for 3.0, but players will, as they go forward, be immersed as immersed as possible. You will need to eat food. If you don't, your life will go down. If you go without food, you won't run as well. You will lose health. Same with water. If you don't shower, NPCs will react differently. 2 to 3 days of real life playing the game, not 2 to 3 days game cycle. No timelines directly yet. Those will be tested. There will be a timeline that makes sense. Blah blah blah. Won't be as much of a chore. Won't be so much of a chore that won't be fun. But there needs to be some reasons why you need food, why you have dinner, etc.
okay. If
That's a quote unquote. That is very interesting.
yeah, I mean,
I never heard
so
this concept before. I mean, I always assumed that there would be an oxygen, stamina type
yes,
system, but food and
those
water survival mechanics are certainly interesting.
WoW requires food buffs. Let's just go straight to that. Like the
wow.
biggest World of Warcraft, the biggest MMO in history, has for years effectively necessitated food buffs in order to do raids or anything along those
Because
lines.
they're so
Mm,
powerful that you need to have them.
And
yep.
Yeah.
if you'll excuse my pun, people eat it up. I mean, they like having a
Uh,
cooking profession. They like having the ability to go fish or, get
So
those
do you
sorts of
want
things.
people to be like master chefs in Star Citizen and they bake you fucking special brownies
Not
that'll make you
not so
better as a
much.
pilot? And meanwhile, you go out there and be like, these brownies suck. Why is this space lizard trying to get me?
I think my point is more along the lines, if an MMO that basically has very little in the way of realism at all
mm,
can find a way to integrate eating and drinking into the game in a way that's relatively non-invasive and that people seem to enjoy, I don't really see a problem with saying if you're an explorer and you're out in the black in Star Citizen, you should be forced to pack a box of snacks before you leave.
Now, that said, if they go about it the way that EverQuest went about it, where you literally have to go buy food and water, if you don't have it, you die. That's a problem in and of itself. So, I mean, I can kind of see having to buy emergency rations, but it was a huge pain when you're out in the middle of some deep dungeon or whatever, and you realize, oh hell, I forgot my sweet rolls, and then you just slowly starve to death. That was not fun. Now, mind you, I don't want this game to be like EverQuest in any way, shape, or form. But that's me.
It doesn't sound like, I mean, it says your life will go down.
Mm.
I'm wondering if they're going to have a point where it basically says, well, you have one hit point or something like that.
Ha,
So
the
you can
Minecraft
live back.
solution.
Yeah, don't screw this up,
Like
kind
your
of.
suit has some emergency stamina, like adrenaline / sugar cocktail it will give you to keep you alive long enough. But
Sure. But
you're
at that point, you're basically confined to your pilot seat because God forbid you trip down the stairs and find yourself on on the hospital street with a rebuy in front of you.
You'll
How
respawn.
did he die? He tripped on the final stair.
He nearly
Going
starved to death,
down.
then he tripped on stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
And
go
it
ahead.
also means that things like bars and that kind of thing could actually have a purpose beyond just being the background for shady dealing. And you could
Well,
go in there, you could buy something for your character to eat while you're out of your ship. All of a
and
sudden, that looks more appealing.
Hey,
and
Craig,
given
we got a line on where there might be a destroyed Idris we could salvage and get it back here for the organization. You want to come with me? Man, I'm real hungry. Can we go after we get some burgers?
well, and it does add a potentially interesting revenue stream for Cloud Imperium, which would be something along the lines of Sapporo, buy it so that you don't die. In-game buff included.
Is that all you need?
Nice.
So it occurs to me that. So here's how I've kind of been dealing with survival mechanics recently. Let me tell you a story about
Uh,
No Man's Sky. This is where my thoughts on survival mechanics started to crystallize. I've been playing a little bit of No Man's Sky recently because they just had on like the anniversary of the release. They had the huge patch for the game that added the third big patch that added a bunch of stuff, and the other two patches also added a decent amount of things, and a lot of the bugs were fixed. And most importantly, I found a mod that would remove the super annoying half-second long press on every stupid interface item in the game and make it a lot more like just clicking to get what
oh
you
my
want.
God.
It's called Fast Actions. It's on the Nexus Mods site for No Man's Sky. If you look up Fast Actions Nexus Mods. Anyway,
I'm writing that down.
it's super awesome. So the crux of this is in No Man's Sky, you have to have a certain amount of fuel in your launch engines to just take off from a planet's surface. And you have to have enough fuel to use your quantum drive type thing up in space. And usually this fuel is very easy to find. It's plutonium. It's all over every planet. I was just playing around in the game and I would always stumble across to plutonium. Oh, let me grab some of that and I'll fill up my ship on the way. Well, I got a little complacent about it. Landed on a planet and realized I did not have enough fuel to take off. And I was like, oh, I'll just go look around for some plutonium. And I kept looking. And I kept looking. And I landed on the planet of no plutonium. That's not
You
supposed
might
to happen.
it is actually. You might actually have to go find a network terminal and buy some.
Okay, I'm pretty sure the closest one of those was several hours walk away. So
No
I
one
just
said
kept
it would be a
walking.
fun walk.
I kept walking in a wider and wider circle around my ship, and then I finally found one. I was like, yes! And I found a piece, and it was not enough to take off. So I was like, damn it, I need to go find more. So then I found one more, and it was just not quite enough. And then I would find some, and it would be deep underground, and in a cave I could not figure out how to get to. And it's like, I don't have the stupid drill mechanic yet to dig into the terrain. This sucks. And it was on my stream, so I was desperately trying to keep people entertained for a half hour, which is literally just me walking around getting more and more frustrated with I really just want to go do this mission, but I can't because now I'm in survival mode. Hey, this is fun. And it's yeah, okay, great. I got to tell that story the one time I got stranded on a planet, and it, looking back, it's kind of cool, and it was cool as a story happening to my character. If it ever happened again, I'd be like, screw this, where's the cheat mode? I'm getting in there right now. For those of you wondering, you can get a mod on nexusmods.com that lowers the launch cost to 0% if you want to avoid that particular. I lowered mine by half. I went from Whatever the
So
default is,
that
I lowered it by half, so I would get twice as many launches for the same amount of
okay.
plutonium, and I'm typically fine with that. But okay, so let me bring that back to my consolidation. So the interesting things that happen when you've got the verisimilitude of like going to eat a meal or
Hmm.
going to drink some water or whatever, I feel like those work really well in stories because the
Yes.
story never deals with those pieces unless it's interesting to the story. At least a good story doesn't. A good story will never divert to the main character going to his favorite restaurant, having his favorite steak, and then going home and going to bed and nothing else happens. No, if he goes to his favorite restaurant, he has to bump into, the antagonist or his friend who's desperately running away from bad guys and needs his help or whatever, right? Something has to happen that drives the plot forward. Except in games, that's not guaranteed. So you're just going into the back of your Idris to the mess to eat by yourself or with your friend, and you're just like, so, did you hear about what happened at Hadrian last week? Turns out the UEE is increasing tariffs on. It's just like, God, I'm already bored just thinking about that. So
Yep.
I don't
And
know. I don't think I
this
like that idea.
this is why RP as a thing
Oh, it would
suffers in
be,
those
yeah,
situations.
yeah.
But
Because you
if you're
can,
not interested in RP, to be fair, it just gives you an excuse to wander around your spaceship,
Yeah.
which is not necessarily a bad thing.
I guess not. I guess what it boils down to is my brain deconstructs this from a design perspective into oh, this is a tax on my time and my memory. Because now the next time I go to
Yes.
the station, I have to remember, did I get enough money or did I get enough supplies of food? Check.
Hmm.
Okay, I did. That just costs me extra to fuel up every time I go to a space station. And if I fail to remember, it's just another skill check. Oh, you forgot to fill up your food, you
And
dumbass. Well, now you're
and
going to pay the penalty for not paying your food tax. And that
and
just
can I
doesn't sound
automate
like a
it?
fun mechanic to me. When you
No.
couch it in the terms of, oh, think of how much more realistic this is, it sounds fine. But when my brain deconstructs it into this is just a tax on existing in the world and playing the game, it sounds like a gold sink for all intents and purposes. And I'm like, why is this here? Anyway,
Well, and even with that description, The Sims still has a better model than forcing you to go out and buy food. I mean, literally in that game, it just charges you whenever you use the stove. I mean, I guess I could kind of see that from like the point of view of, hey, we've got a kitchenette on the Phoenix or on the Aurora. But yeah, making you go and shop for Big Benny's Box O Noodles Emporium.com or whatever the hell it's going to be on the mobile glass would not be a fun mechanic at all. But I could kind of see a metagame around buying, rare and exotic foodstuffs on one planet and shipping it to another planet where it can be prepared and sold by NPCs in stores. But even then, again, it should go back to what Gray was describing, food buffs, as opposed to everyone's got a box of ramen stored away on their ship forever in perpetuity. Literally, it's made as a byproduct of the fusion drive. We have fusion noodles, and away we
And
go.
and let's be honest about this. There's some interesting mechanics potentially with food and water or whatever you want to call it when you start talking about exploration, but you can't use it as a balancing factor for things like combat particularly well, solely because either the distance will be too low for it to matter,
Mhm.
in which case it's no longer a balancing factor because everyone will just be well fed when they get on their Idris. The Idris will land wherever it is and then they'll shoot at people. Or it's going to be incredibly taxing and you're going to have to eat or drink constantly to maintain um, whatever status you want to maintain, as a buff, effectively, in which case it's meaningless. So it's sort of an interesting balanced strike.
Yep.
Now, you can say, okay, we want to make sure that this is a meaningful mechanic. For the purpose of realism, we want you as an explorer to have to bring a box of food and water, and yes, that is a skill check. Or you can say outright it's a buff, but it has to be a very short-term buff.
hmm.
And that short-term buff then becomes, literal wow food, in which situation you just have a crate of that, which is a skill check, which you bring when you're going to go to FPS or something along those lines. Everyone grabs a candy bar and off they go.
Yeah, it's certainly a divisive question, I would guess.
Oh
Remember
yeah.
there was the Skyrim had a bunch of those like super survival mods where you just had to do all kinds of extra unnecessary things than you normally do to survive. Oh, you got to build a tent when it's cold, and you got to build a fire, and you have to cook your food, and you have to hunt, and if you don't, now that kind of reminds me of so in D&D, I don't know if how much you guys have played of tabletop type RPGs, but
It's been a long
the
time.
old school ones were always like okay, you have 5 days worth of rations. You've been in the dungeon for 3 days. What are you gonna do? Like because the point of that survival mechanic of bringing the stuff is it leads you to interesting decisions. Do we spend the next day delving deeper into the dungeon, but potentially not getting any food while we're down there, right, or something like that? But a lot
And
of
that goes to
people,
exploration.
right, and that could add some interesting trade-offs there, but a lot of people in D&D, at least we do, for example, we just don't worry about food or encumbrance unless somebody's like breaking rules very significantly. Then we'll lean in and go, by the way, how have you been eating for the past 30 days or whatever, if there's something really weird going on. But what D&D 5th edition did is they just gave you the idea of, okay, everybody's going to have a lifestyle. And if your lifestyle is opulent, it costs you 5 gold a day. And if
Yeah.
it's regular, affluent, it's 1 gold a day. And if it's, peasant, it's, 5 copper a day or
Copper a
whatever.
day.
So, I mean,
Hmm.
honestly, it could be something like that. And it would then feel really meaningless, or it could be
Yeah.
something like you're talking about, like, oh yeah, we have all these Big Benny's vending machines, we got to use them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Although,
right.
I,
do you know who did food right in the modern the modern game systems?
Who's that?
Subnautica. You need food, you
Yeah.
need water. It's intrinsic to survival, but the reason it works is it's intrinsic to a survival game. That's not what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Although, to discuss your earlier D&D comment, Joe Cairns in YouTube chat has said, "Cleric, create food and water. No problem. Thank you,
Just
thank you,
use up a
Joe.
spell slot to keep us alive. What's wrong with
The
that?
the war
a
god
cantrip?
provideth." No, I think it was a level 1 or level 2 spell, if I
You're
remember
right.
correctly. It's
Well,
been
at
a
the early
long
levels,
time.
using up that spell slot could be a big deal. When you're
But
level
I was always
16, you're like, yeah, whatever, dog. Have some food and water.
but I was always the war cleric with that two-handed greatsword to handle every other problem that came up. So, all right.
All right.
So I think we've covered food.
We have indeed. So anyway, let's move on to the next piece I wanted to discuss here. I just thought the survival mechanic concept was really interesting.
It is.
So we also can then move on to the Gamescom presentation. There was a lot of stuff going on there, but one of the more interesting things they showed us was something that I don't think anybody was really expecting. It's the
No.
face over IP technology
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
allows you, for those that didn't see it, to have a webcam set up pointed at your face, and when your face moves, your in-game character's face will move by tracking your actual facial features using facial recognition. You don't have to have a lot of dots all over your face like they do
Nope.
for the mocap thing. It
Nope.
just does it a poorer job of that with some general face recognition thing. Uh, and alongside this, they launched the idea that they're going to be providing their own webcam specifically designed for this purpose. The main things include 60 FPS, 720 or 1080p, low light sensitivity, and
Mm-hmm.
a sort of thinner field of view so that it doesn't distort your face by trying to capture a wide angle of multiple people like a lot of webcams are designed to
Yep.
do.
Yeah.
So
Which,
that's going to be the CIG webcam, though I assume they're partnering with some hardware manufacturer for that.
oh yeah, no, the guy who was there was from that hardware manufacturer. So
Yeah. Face tag
uh,
guy right at the
that
top.
was probably my biggest problem with this entire presentation. I didn't need a 30-minute ad in the middle of the 2.5-hour stream
No?
about this guy's company, and that's exactly what I got. Now, this is cool technology. Let's not, well, okay, we'll worry about it in a second. You know, those of you who have an Oculus Rift, and that includes 2/3 of us in this chat, or other VR device, who will not be able to take advantage of this. That should be fine. I look forward to being the one known for having a mouth that doesn't move when I talk. But uh, the thing is, like that guy sat there and he went on and he discussed a lot of really cool things, and he sounds just like a whole lot of guys I know who have companies that they're trying to market and get out there. So Sig and he have partnered, and he had no problem espousing the virtues of his technology and his company, and they've got it in the game, and it looks cool. But damn it, was it annoying to get an ad in the middle of my crowdfunding game.
You know, I actually appreciated one big thing about it.
Mm.
Um, it did first and foremost make me go take a look at my webcam and see that indeed I do not have a webcam that does 60 FPS
It's rare.
1080p.
It's rare.
It
I
is
only
very
just
rare.
recently got one that
Um,
does 720 60 FPS, and that
And
is
Wow.
not common.
yeah, I was unaware actually of that technological limitation. And I knew I have a 1080p camera, but I wasn't aware that I had a 1080p camera that was, limited down into the 30s or, mid 20s on frame rate.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, I appreciated that this technology will replace any need for me to go buy Track IR.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, he did mention how when you turn your head enough, it stops being able to track you. But I have a feeling, just doing it right now, that if you turn your head enough so that it stops able to track you, you won't be able to easily see the screen anymore. So you're naturally
Yeah.
limited to the same field of view that a Track IR does. But you're right, a
Yep.
Track IR is $100 or more, right? If I'm not mistaken.
And
No.
the thing
Is
about
it
Track
not?
IR, you do have to go through a lot of config for that to decide how
Yeah.
much deflection
Yes.
turns into how much deflection on the screen.
Oh my God, yes.
Um, with this, limiting it to natural head motion and effectively saying if you look up 10 degrees, your character is going to look up 10 degrees, and basically trying to stick that as the in-game one-to-one limiter,
Hmm.
I kind of appreciate that. I don't really necessarily want to look 4 degrees to the left and have my character look 40.
40, yeah.
I just want to be able to have my friends say something that I find suspicious, and I don't even answer them. I just look at them and raise my eyebrow. Like I just want that. I do. I would really enjoy that being a thing, because I just want to be like
Oh
skeptical
man,
eyebrow raise. Oh really? But that's
eye
not
rolls
possible in
are
normal
us.
technology. Um,
So the thing is, like I've been following this technology for a while in the non-commercial market. It's referred to as telepresence, and the big players there are Facebook and a couple of other companies and a bunch of smaller ones, of which this guy is one of them. So I have to credit him. He did manage to get attached to a company that can get him into the mainstream, and it's done at a budget, which is awesome. I mean, it's very well done, and they are getting cameras out there capable of what they need to do. If you
Hmm.
ever want to terrify yourself, uh, combine telepresence with another interesting technology called Voco, which is being done by Adobe, but there are others, which will let you say anything you want in your voice and then replace it with anybody else's voice you've got a 40-second recording of.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I think I've
So
heard people like take President Obama's voice and like make him say weird stuff that he would never normally say.
they've had a few of those that are very highly scripted. The Voco demonstration that I saw, and NPR did a bit on this, was on Key and Peele.
Mm.
And so so it was like they won an Emmy or a Grammy or some other BS award no one really cares about unless you're a high school age girl. But the point of it is that they sat down. I'm alienating the audience here quickly. Don't worry about it. The point of it is
Hmm.
they sat down quickly and showed on live in a demonstration with Key and Peele in the audience. He changed his speech from "I kissed my wife, my kids, and my dog," and then Peele to "I kissed my dog, my wife, and my kids" in that order. And then they started inserting things he never said. And the guy, if it was Key or Peele, that he gets it and says, "You're a wizard.
A
Witchcraft."
warlock.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, the point that NPR was making as they did their little bit there on Truth Warriors was that very soon no one will be able to trust anything you actually hear recorded because the technology to break your trust in all recorded media currently exists, which was really
Lovely.
That's
interesting.
actually what
And
we needed. We needed reasons to be even more distrustful of things that we hear other people say.
yeah, so now we have to go back to very trusted sources. And this technology, the face capture stuff, was coupled with that voco to make someone take a still image of, say, George W. Bush, and then using and mouth along with whatever it was they wanted to say, and then in turn play a voco style recording of something he never said, such as "I am Saddam Hussein's gay lover, and he and I are enjoying that down in hell," something like that. And he never said it. It's insanity to think that he would, but it's in his voice, and I guarantee to you that some fringe media group is going to run with that and claim that it's real, Alex Jones. And so, that's how it goes.
and then that's the ball game right there. Yeah,
Exactly. So
that
it
technology is
changes
certainly.
everything.
I mean, we just went down a scary road of like, so all this stuff that's so cool in Star Citizen. Let me get back to a more positive point. I love the idea of your character's head turning and moving in line with what your actual head is turning and moving, so that when you're playing with someone else, you can see what they are looking at and what they are inspecting. Aside from just their body movement, when they have their gun out, you can usually see where their gun is pointing. That always gives you an idea of where the character's looking. But if it's
Hmm.
looking up at a structure or down at the ground inspecting a box, like that just adds so much more verisimilitude to the whole thing, and
Do you know?
massively increases immersion. I've noticed that specifically because of what you can see going on in VR recently.
But I'm going to break it. I'm going to glue two googly eyes right here, and then map that to the eye thing, and then just have
Just
wherever the googly eyes are
everywhere.
looking is where it's going to look.
So it tracks the googly eyes. I see.
Exactly right. I'm in.
Oh no.
So your character's just got some lazy
What's
eyes looking in all directions. You're talking
what's
to him
wrong with
like, Bob,
Callie?
what's wrong with your eyes?
He's never been right since he had that fall.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the
Gameplay demo.
the gameplay demo. Yeah,
There was a gameplay
they
demo?
featured the Ursa rover pretty heavily, and
They did.
one of the things that I noticed they said in there is, at one point they're trying to load the Ursa rover onto the constellation, and Chris points out that, sometimes this can be really tricky. You got to be careful. And I'm thinking, like, I'm comparing it to my thoughts because I just recently started playing Elite to give that a try and just be able to compare it. And the landing sequence in there was kind of cool because it's very, very immersive, where you are given docking instructions, go to this dock, and you have to go down and land manually, and then it takes you underground, et cetera, and then you leave, and it feels all right, and it doesn't take too long, and it doesn't see, once you do it the first time, it's pretty easy to go and do it quickly again in the future.
Mhm.
And I'm a little worried if they go too far on that immersion thing. It'll be super cool, like the first time you're doing something, and then it will just be really annoying and frustrating. Like, oh god, you went two
Well,
2 millimeters too far. Back up a little bit again. Like, there's no room for error. I just wish there was like a little automatic thing where when you pulled it in, it would automatically finish for you and just put it in the same spot. Like, if that's a big problem, is what I'm trying to say. If it actually is difficult and to the point where it's frustrating, just make it auto load once you get it close enough. It's really, that's fine. This is 2900. If we have self-driving cars today, I can accept that it auto parks for me by the time it gets into the
Keep in
constellation.
mind, they have talked about locking things down to the floor
Hmm.
with pads and that kind of thing. My guess would be that for vehicles that you're planning to park, like an Ursa or a Nox or something like that, there will actually be something in the UI that says park vehicle,
Yeah.
at which point it will auto align it slightly to wherever it is, if it can,
Hmm.
and then confirm that it did it, which is sort of along the lines of the rovers in Elite Dangerous.
hmm
You just have to get it generally in the right position and then just say, load me into my ship. And
Right.
then it
And then you've got
does.
like a little hand that's got extra room to go
But
left or right, like a claw, and then pick it up and
yeah,
move it into the right
I,
place.
I would say that level of balance, but forcing people to be in a more correct position is probably more appropriate anyway, because driving my rover in upside down and backwards and slightly sideways and having it insta flip into the right position and show up in the ship
Yeah.
feels a little gimmicky.
That would,
Yep.
yes. So anyway, I just that's my concern of the week for today.
Oh,
But
is that
we
the
can
concern of the week?
we can talk a little bit more about the rest of the presentation here, and I think I can find a piece of it to pull up here while we're talking.
Now,
Here we go.
I I did like seeing in that gameplay video how they began mixing in the ground weapons versus the space-based assets in the ships. And you can see they have actual anti-ship combat devices.
Yeah, the railgun.
Yep,
Did you catch
exactly
the
right.
demo earlier in the week where somebody shot somebody in a heavy armor suit with a railgun?
And they just like erase them.
Yeah, yeah, they
Yeah.
just melt them. The person just like falls to the ground in a heap.
No more for you. So they spend a little time. They're going through the same sort of place where we're meeting Miles Eckhart in the same place, but of course this time it's much nicer. There's a lot more people. Like, what do they say? 200 NPCs walking around that base now, having their own
Yeah,
little day of work, going doing this, doing that. Although how much time must Chris Roberts have spent doing that demo to where he's like quoting everything that's about to happen? Like
Yes.
he's on Groundhog Day.
40.
He's like, we're gonna watch this guy. He's gonna come over here. He's gonna try to fix something, and the workman over there is gonna take a seat. No, I guess he's coming by for a second lap. On a second lap, he takes a seat. Like, wow, okay, this is kind of breaking my immersion here. You're gonna tell me everything that happens. It must
I
not.
love the
It must
Aquila's
repeat a
bridge
lot.
though. That is
Um,
so pretty.
it is
It
very
was
pretty.
very pretty. Now, that said, I have to say the poor voice actress tried to call attention to how vibrant it was in there, and when she said it, the screen was empty. There was nobody there. Like, I think they were looking at one person in a Fallout. So it's like, it's so dynamic in here. I'm like, what the hell are we talking about? I don't see any dynamism.
Yeah, I mean,
Script read incorrectly.
Yes.
setting aside the sort of little role playing thing that they did and or the execution thereof, the actual technical demonstration was, I think just about as impressive as it was last time in terms of changes and things. The
The
main big
number of
stuff was the NPCs.
asteroids,
Yeah.
the whole size of that belt.
Oh yeah, no, that was well done. It was very, very large. It was more of a Star Wars style asteroid belt than say
Yeah,
the real one. But you know what? I'm fine with that. I've come to the conclusion that I can't mix real science and sci-fi.
Yeah, not if you want it to be fun. So
Well, Kerbal Space Program, to be fair, is a lot of fun, even as I am blowing up rockets on the platform.
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that's
Yeah.
true. So now I think I did point out it in the show notes here is when we get later where they come in and they land and everybody
Hmm.
claps when they land. Like really you just need to thrust down. It's not hard, guys.
Well,
Um,
don't thrust down too fast.
just don't go too fast.
yeah.
So they come in
Or you end
here.
up like that thing.
It does show a seamless transition from
Oh,
space
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
planet, so that
But
was
I'm just
nice. We've
saying,
not seen that.
I'm jaded. I've seen that before. Last Gamescom, guys. It's not that big a deal. So they come in here. They get the black box to go back to the rover, and then their constellation gets attacked by some enemies. I think those are cutlasses coming in to attack the rover.
Cutlass
And
and the Buccaneer, I think it was.
so he's got the railgun here trying to shoot it, and oh, explodes and destroyed. Very nice, very nice. So at this point, it was pretty cool to suddenly see the Idris come out of nowhere to save the day and or help them out. So and then it crushes the rover when it was trying to get on. Like, I like that. That's kind of a
Yeah.
hilarious problem with the demo versus just like
No.
a straight crash.
No.
Like, oh,
Repeat
John's
after-
PC went down. Like, nope, the rover got crushed trying to climb into the Idris here. So that
Clearly all pre-recorded. Clearly none
Clearly
of that
pre-recorded.
happening in real time. Yeah.
Repeat after me. Emergent gameplay.
now
was
one thing I
very
noticed
entertaining.
is they did have some in atmosphere combat, and we saw that.
Mhm.
I think I can't find the spot where it was, but we did see that there, and it seemed like the ships can still just like hover without a problem.
Oh, yeah.
Like it just
Yeah, they can-
looked just like space combat, except
You can
Icarus
hover,
was
but your
clearly
acceleration
hovering.
and turning are affected.
Yeah.
okay.
So that's what the Gamescom comments were, was in atmosphere, you had some inertia that you didn't have in Zero G.
Or some
Yeah,
air
there
resistance.
there
and
was
stuff.
some weight, basically.
Yeah.
You were moving and it was more sluggish to handle. So there is some physics differences, whether or not it's a really good model or if it's just kind of a constant applied to every input. We don't know. But
But we're not fighting against 9G planets here. I mean, if you've
No,
seen
fair
the stuff on
point.
Elite Dangerous, you basically hover on all those planets too, right up until you get
Mhm.
one that's over about 2Gs and
then
find
you
yourself
fight.
pancaked.
Yeah.
I see. So yeah, and the Idris itself is massive. It's super
Oh, it's
cool how big it
gorgeous.
is. Like we
Yep.
just haven't seen anything bigger than I
Now,
guess a caterpillar when it like actually in engine. Have we like moving inside of it like this?
Yeah,
yeah, that's a good point. We haven't really seen anything huge.
we saw a little bit of stuff with the Morrow Tour, but
Yeah.
the Morrow
That's
Tour
right.
was not a completed asset, and it was not an asset flying around.
Right, that's what I mean. Like
Um,
it was
yeah,
obvious that it could have just been any FPS level. Like the fact that
Yeah.
this is a completed thing that flies around on its own and you can get in it from a planet and then it takes off and goes into space and has a space battle.
with another one,
With
by the
another one
way.
of yeah, exactly.
So
Um,
we had a landing point made in YouTube chat. Sir Tobe has pointed out that it means they have correctly implemented the physical dampening landing gear,
Hmm.
which they apparently did not have before. But you
that
mentioned
that's where
scale.
it like lands and then it gets cushioned by the legs. Is that what we're
Yep.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're clearly still working on tuning those, but it actually squishes in proper ways.
Yep. Yep.
Now, that said, you mentioned scale, how big the Idris was, but that was one area of the presentation I got annoyed by. And that's when the Idris is coming up and it's over the planetoid, the moon, and or maybe it was a phoenix is coming up. It's over the moon, and Robert says, all of Skyrim could fit in that crater there. And I laughed, and I thought, dog, what are you doing in this room? Okay, I laughed, and and then I said, well, if that crater is as detailed as all of Skyrim, that's a fair comparison, but it's not. Not even close. Not it is bare desert. That's not
It
not
was
even close to
procedurally
what.
generated rocks. That's all that's in that crater
Yeah,
right now.
yeah. It's not even an apt comparison. Let's try again.
They needed to give a sense of scale, and they needed to give a sense of scale to people who
That's
are used to
true,
running
and
across the Skyrim level for hours.
that's fair enough. Uh, excuse me. So we had the Idris battle in space, which is pretty interesting.
Railgun. That
Railgun.
punched a
They
huge
did
hole through
some
there.
really weird dogfighting maneuvers with the Idris. Like we've got this railgun. Let's go like buzz them like they're the control tower in Top Gun. I was like, what are they doing? They're just flying
Yep.
towards them and then doing a quick 180, like they're gonna get behind them or something. You're not a dogfighter. Fight like a capital ship, damn it.
Well, but it was cool to watch that pass though.
Yeah, and I
When they came
really
across, well,
what
and they came across, and you can see like they're both the ass ends of the ships are shooting at each other, and you can see the limitation on weaponry. So it's not like you've got weapons that are clipping into each other and shooting through the aft end. In order for them to bring anything to bear, they'd have to make that turn and shoot again. That would have, now I would have liked
Yep.
to have seen a more capital style combat. Launch some large torpedoes that very slowly make their way over, turn and hit you, kind of thing.
man,
But
I had
ADCs, all that kind of
I
stuff.
really
yep,
hoped the reason they were making that pass is because they were going to show off some like side mounted guns or cannons or something, and we are going to have like an old school like capital ship of the line, like massive amounts of cannons firing out the side of the ship. Uh, but
That's
we
the
did not.
Javelin.
I guess that might be the javelin. Yeah,
The Idris, at least my impression of the Idris was it doesn't have that
give them the
many anti-capital ship
broadsides.
weapons.
So
Like, if you're trying to shoot someone in an Idris, you want your nose on them.
yeah. And yeah,
right.
each ship has its own thing, and that's why I thought it was kind of ridiculous that it was doing that. And then it was like, oh, they're gonna show broadsides, and then they didn't, and I was epically disappointed. But okay, so overall, we have had 3.0 teased in front of us now for like a year, and we got to see the progress in the form of the burn downs come in the last couple of weeks. We got to see this presentation here. People got to play it a little bit on the show floor, a limited version of it. What are your guys' thoughts? Is it going to live up to your expectations? Is it going to live up to everybody else's expectations for like a giant milestone of what they've been hyping it up to be?
Bridger, it's the internet. Of course, it won't live up to everyone's expectations.
All right, but
And
I'm asking for
is
your
most,
assessment.
I know, and I'm setting you up for reality and a joke. So So whoever it is who doesn't have their expectations lived up to will then bitch and whine and moan and make it the most tragic thing that has happened since Adam and Eve fell from heaven. And you know exactly how that ended. It ended with Star Citizen. So, uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, I personally think that they did a great job. I look forward to see it working correctly, and as bug free and defect free as possible. What I've seen from their presentation, from the ads and all of that, was absolutely amazing and well done. And it will be really really cool to see it get out there. But I promise you, as soon as it drops, you'll hear nothing but complaints. And the important thing to remember is the complaints are basically from people who are not you and have a different viewpoint, and just accept people will complain about things that didn't meet up what they wanted versus what they thought they wanted. Now, Ian, what did you think about the Gamescom demonstration and all that stuff that came out?
Yeah, I know Gray has to leave
I,
here. Do you want to give us your quick 1 minute overview?
10
I
seconds.
think it was an amazing demonstration that they have big things coming in the engine. Specifically, being able to have two big ships flying around like that, seeing all those asteroids, um, seeing just the size of Delmar and the stability of the planets. I think that we'll have a really good thing coming with 3.0 and beyond. But yes, as noted, there's always going to be disappointed people, and there will be continued dissatisfaction about the flight model until that hits a more finalized form. I think there's a lot of folks that, regardless of what CIG does, until they're very, very happy with the flight model, nothing else is going to matter to them.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly true. Uh, and you kind of, since that was the first thing they started working on, you'd think that that would have more progress, but they've been really, deciding that that is something that can be tweaked much more easily in the future, but all this other stuff has to be done in the meantime, or you're never getting anywhere with the whole Star Citizen thing. So,
True.
yeah, I just hope that. I gotta tell you, my biggest fear and concern with this game is the controls. The controls are gonna be a nightmare for everybody because there's so many of them. One big great leap forward is that a lot of the things that used to all have to have their own buttons are now going to be like little things you can click inside the cockpit. That is going to give a lot of people the opportunity to just ignore the hotkeys and learn them later, and instead just click around in your cockpit to turn the power on, to put the landing gear up. Like, just say, screw it, I'm learning all the other things. I'll come back and learn the cockpit later. This is a giant game. I can't learn everything at the same time. That
Fair.
is a huge step forward, right?
Yeah.
Having those tooltips pop up at the bottom and say, by the way, scroll your mouse wheel to change how fast you're running. Huge step forward for onboarding people. I
Oh yeah.
think the next big thing, and something that has to happen before launch because this game is so huge, it cannot use, and because you're going to have so many different types of controls, it can't use a standard controls menu. You cannot list every single possible key and group them into different subgroups and then tell people, yeah, just buy in your controls. Because if you have somebody coming to this game for the first time, they have no idea what a target HUD forward means,
Yep.
or target this or that. You might have an idea, but then two of them sound the same, and it's like, which one is the one that I think it is? And unless you have extremely robust tooltips pop up on every single one of those controls explaining what they do, you're going to have a big problem. I think what they need is essentially all of the important controls. Take the top important controls. And looks like we lost Gray. He
We
had to
did
take
lose
off
Gray.
early today. So thanks to him for showing up. But I know he has to go attend a Sounders game because it's very important. If he doesn't get there, they're going to lose. Everybody knows this. If you don't attend, your team will lose. But
You are
anyway,
absolutely correct.
so uh,
Actually, Bridger, that explains a lot about the Rams last year. I never
ah,
went to a game and they sucked ass.
oh, okay. There you go. Now everybody knows to blame you.
I mean,
So
that's fine.
also the bookies know to call you up and tell you which games to attend. But anyway, back to what I say. What I would love to see is a more innovative control scheme where where the game will say, walk you through a bunch of different controls. Like, you just click movement controls, and it
Hmm.
says, please use the axis that you, or use the button that you want to use, or the axis that you want to use to move pitch up and down. And if you have a joystick, you move the joystick. If you have a mouse, you move the mouse up and down. If you would just want to use W and S or whatever, then you just press W, and then it says, okay, now press the axis down, S or whatever, and it just interprets that and says, okay, now test it. Is it working as you expect? Okay, boom, we move on to the next one. Have the ability for somebody to do it that way, where they then get to immediately see the response. And if it's right, then they immediately move on to the next. If it's wrong, they can press a button and go back and rebind it. That, I think, is going to be a way better experience than preventing somebody with a giant list, or just saying, well, if you're not using the joystick that we have built into here, you're going to have to go through and bind everything yourself. And by the way, the list of things you can bind is like 100 long, and you won't need all of them. And many of them are derivative or important or duplicated from other things, like, throttle can also be used with lateral forward and backward thrust, could also be used separately as that, and it's coupled and decoupled, and
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Their big challenge is going to be getting the control system to scale from the low fidelity, I've got a mouse and a keyboard,
Hmm.
all the way up to I've got, two different HOTAS sticks plus a thrust and foot pedals, and then I've got something I do with an appendage we won't talk about, but I have to wiggle in my chair a lot.
Are you a
Uh,
centauri? Uh,
yeah,
so
like the bike from South Park, right?
yeah,
So yeah, so
wow.
it's a good throwback and a terrifying visual. Plus, throwing in VR and this FOIP and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We can already see how every one of these surfaces makes a much harder problem that much more difficult, and that much more
Yep.
difficult, and it grows exponentially.
So
I
yes,
look
someone in the
forward.
chat said Elite Dangerous and other space sims have been doing this for a long time. Yeah, and how popular are
True.
those right now?
I think that's a good
Right?
point.
It's
And
it's it's a niche because they're so hard to get into, and I understand why they're so hard to get into. It's not easy
having
to
done
make
it.
this work. What you just explained, you have to
Yep.
figure out how to do it with the simplest mouse and keyboard, but also with a controller, and also with a HOTAS and a HOSAS and a HOAM, or what is it? HOTAM. Um,
Hotam.
so
Hands hands on throttle and mouse.
I
Yep.
think the real way to do this is just decide which is the
Hmm.
controller we're designing around, and then
Hmm.
just make it work for that the best. I think
Yes.
they're actually going to be shooting themselves in the foot. I honestly believe that trying to support
Hmm.
all of these things
Yeah.
is going to be a mistake, and it's going to cost them
Certainly.
in the future, because
In
it's going to
sales.
be at the very least it's going to cost them an easy onboarding, because they're going to have to build a tutorial that accounts for all of these. So either it's going to take forever to build that right, or the
Uh-huh.
tutorial is going to be lackluster in at least some cases. I suggest that we take what they've already announced, which is that they teamed up with Cytec / Logitech now, I guess, to make
Hmm.
their own, Star Citizen peripherals, HOTAS or whatever. Um, I think they
Hotax.
just, what was that old game that you had to buy the two stick setup for, like the Xbox game?
Steel Battalion.
Steel Battalion.
Steel Battalion.
I'm suggesting that Star Citizen's retail price just be $200, and it comes with their own
Oh,
customized
Jesus.
Steel Battalion controller.
So
Just
wait,
everybody's
let's
already paid $200. They already have. We know that. We can just include a controller
so
now.
let's take a look at the Steel Battalion total sales, shall we? All right. Who's with me? We're gonna take a look at that. We're gonna see exactly what a good idea this is. Let's see, there was a sequel released in 2004. That's actually shocking to me. I hadn't realized it had gotten that many. I don't see a single thing in the wiki about. But yes, that setup for reference is still, to this day, in my opinion, one of the best control surfaces made for a simulation game ever. However, the biggest problem is that number one, it didn't work with every Xbox apparently.
Really?
And yeah, so there were problems playing on consoles fitted with some versions of the Executor mod chip. And so a lot of people wanted to buy it who were the serious gamers couldn't use the damn thing. I don't see anything about actual sales numbers out of Capcom.
Maybe they wouldn't.
And
Maybe they didn't give them out because they were a little embarrassed.
I mean, I fair, but it was good enough that they sold out of all the ones they made.
Huh.
Uh, and then they re-released in limited quantities, so it was good enough that people actually wanted it. But okay, so I guess what I'm saying is most people never heard of Battalion because while it was popular among idiots like you and I, it was not popular with most people. And then the later ones even dumbed down that particular mechanic, so you didn't need to use the whole set if you didn't want to. Um, so yeah, having it escalate, a simple joystick for $20 being good enough is probably what they should aim for, and then you can put everything else on your throttle, on your foot pedals, a fully customizable suite for the people that are crazy
I
like
mean,
you and
even if
I.
there's just like on the control menu, like separate from everything else, it's just got a box that says essential controls. And it's
Hmm.
got the 20 or so things that you're always going to need no matter what your setup is. You're always going to need a throttle up, throttle down. You're always going to need this. You're always going to need that. And then you've got the gajillion optional ways to set up that
There
are
you go.
currently there, but just have it separate. Just to give an example, like I said, I just recently got into Elite, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that made getting into it super easy is that I got this Thrustmaster, the new T16000M
Wow,
FCS, the one that
that
came out just about
8
12 months
months ago.
ago, something like
Yeah,
that.
that's
Um,
very orange.
it is very orange, and it actually lights up when you move it around when
Yeah,
it's
no, the,
plugged
the
in.
the old one that I have a couple of also lights up when you touch it. And I discovered a problem with that particular setup. I left it plugged in, and MechWarrior Online had gone ahead and bound to it, and my 2-year-old son was in here. He was pressing buttons on the stick, and I thought nothing of it. Then all of a sudden, in my light mech, as I'm trying to sneak up and scout the enemy lance, missiles come flying out of me.
You hit a button that was bound to the wrong
What the
button.
hell was that? and and it did not end well. So, but yeah, and I agree with your statement that we need to dial it in and focus on a control scheme. And Cloud Imperium, because of promises made, is going to lose a lot of faith in the community from certain people
Mm-hmm.
because the promise was made they're going to be totally equal at all times and always.
Yeah,
There will be one control scheme to rule them all, and it will be good on all platforms.
yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, Carnifex points out, and I think I mentioned earlier, that the inner thought system that allows you to just click on buttons so that you'll have a UI that can do some of these things instead of memorizing like a ton of keys to like boot up your thing and lower your ladder
Hmm.
and whatever. So that's definitely super valuable, and I think that and the tooltips, very big step up from what we had in Star Citizen. But anyway, what I was
True.
trying to say before, so I got the FCS that comes with the throttle here, and I really
Yeah.
like the throttle is like a push thing. It's not like a twist that goes backwards and forwards on like an axis, like a
Yeah.
real throttle. It's like a push back and forth, which actually I didn't think I would like, but I like it a lot. Anyway,
Okay.
the when I got this, I noticed that I went to the website for the drivers, and
Yeah.
they have their own software that allows you to bind,
Oh yeah.
shape the axis curves of the whatever,
Yes.
and also allows you to
And
bind keyboard keys to the buttons on the
hmm
joystick and things like that. And one of the things they had
uh,
was a special key binding file. Uh-oh.
sorry.
A
Go
special
ahead.
key binding file
Hmm.
for Elite that you would put in the Elite folder, and that you would then choose an Elite. So it would
Oh.
set up your controls in Elite. Then it had a
Okay.
special profile for their software that would match the buttons and sticks. And then they had a visual guide
Okay.
saying, this button does this button does that. And then
Brilliant.
they had instructions on how to do all that. So I was just like, oh, well, this made it real easy. I put this file here, this file there, select this
Yep.
in game, and I'm good to go. I've got on my second monitor, it tells me all the controls I need. One problem with that, I mean, like I said, that helped me a lot. One problem with that. In that game, there are 3 functions that are very important. Most of the things on here that are easily accessible are pretty important to be able to do quickly and easily.
Okay.
But 3 things which you always have to be able to do quickly and easily were not things that you could do quickly and easily. Throwing on a shield cell is like an emergency thing. Like, oh crap, my
Ah.
shields are down. I need to use a shield cell. Or
Press a button.
or using a heat sink or
Hmm.
deploying chaff. All 3 of those things are like oh shit moments where you have to do them at a moment's notice, and a split second could make a difference. And you know where they're located? on the bottom of the joystick, nowhere
Where
near eye. You have to take your hand off throttle and stick in order to press those three buttons. And you know what's bizarre is there were
Mhm.
three buttons that were
Unused.
unused.
Yep. That's because the guy who
Okay.
made the control scheme didn't actually play the game.
Yeah, but everything else was pretty well laid out. So
Well,
somebody was obviously thinking about it.
because in every game, trigger is shoot. Then you've got,
Yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
alt weapon, etc. So there are some similar commonalities across a lot of platforms, and I actually use that to my advantage in different flight sims and things like that. War Thunder, realistic, not realistic, the other one, simulation battles, is almost identical to my Star Citizen and my old Elite bindings. There were changes, like I didn't have two two sticks in War Thunder because that would have been very confusing, but I always had, my main fire was on, one trigger, and then the alt weapon, if rockets or whatever it was going to be, was on another button right there near the main one. So yeah, you can follow along with a lot of different games, and they each mirror each other.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get into space sims with 6 degrees of freedom and all that, that's when this control scheme begins to break down.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fairly valuable if you could just like go through all of the main control schemes that people are using: the X52, the X65, the
Yep.
X55, keyboard and
Yep.
mouse, and just like have those all preset in their game ahead of time. That would
Hmm.
be a bunch of extra work, but that would be so valuable. Especially if you
Yes.
also have a special thing you can print out, like they did specifically for, like, I've got my old Logitech, Extreme 3D Pro Sidewinder. I have that kicking around here, and they've done that for Star Citizen. You could choose that specific stick, and it would show you the defaults for all the buttons, and that was great. But I'm just, they need to have that
Yep.
available for everybody. It's even hand on stick and stick,
And
which still
and then
everybody says is great, but I don't get it. I
yep.
don't know. I can't.
And
It
even
just bugs me.
I'm with you, totally understood. And even after they do all this work to make it work and play nice with everybody, you're going to have a billion people that do it their own way.
Mm-hmm.
But at least they'll have somewhere to start with everything mapped.
Exactly.
So
Everybody just needs a place to
it's a
start.
shot. Yep. No, I'm with you. And you remember in the old, like what, Star Citizen 1.0, right, where nothing was mapped and you had to go to every time until they eventually gave you the ability to save your old mapping and bring it in. You had to go into the old engine file. Yeah, I mean, this is a growing pain, and I think we're going to get there. But yeah, and then once they get the Oculus, how's that going to work, and how's that going to track versus Track IR versus Vive and
Yeah.
Tracy Vive, and yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question. All right,
Yep.
so I think we've just about covered it here.
Hmm.
Why don't we move on to life in the verse? I think you and I both recently just picked up Oculus Rifts during the big summer sale.
We did. There was a big summer
I
sale,
think they're still
and
on sale.
they are because Vive then immediately cut their prices as well.
Now, I think that the $400 price to get the Rift and the touch controllers and a bunch of games that come with
Yes,
the touch controllers,
is a better deal.
that well, no, I was going to say I'm pretty sure that is still a temporary thing. I think it's going to go
Oh
back
yeah,
up to 500 at some point. I think they extended it through the
well,
end of
five,
August.
5 or 6.
Five. I think it's
Okay,
going to go back to five because it was six
okay.
originally. Then they cut it by
Oh,
$100.
okay.
Then they put it on sale down to
Mm-hmm.
400 for a
Yeah.
limited time. That's what they keep been saying. I mean, it's certainly possible that they come and say $400, new price, $400. But
Three
so
ninety nine, 3.99. Sorry,
so you and I both bought it at least in
we
part because of
did.
that giant $200 price cut is no joke.
Yes. Yep.
So what is your initial evaluation? What kind of games have you been playing, and what's worked really well? What
So
hasn't?
let's pop up my Oculus Home thing here. All right. So what have I been playing? Well, I started out a little bit on Elite, but I've not gone too deep into it. And then I picked up, or I tried out Subnautica, which, if you've not played it before, is a survival game where you crash onto an alien world that is mostly water, and then you have to survive while swimming. And if you have a fear of deep water and things underneath you or behind you being very quiet to eat you, then this is the way you will treat it, by immersing yourself in an environment that makes you feel like you are in deep water with jaws about to grab you at any second.
Yeah.
Um, and I just downloaded Robo Recall. I've not played it yet. Subnautica, for reference, does extremely well with the VR implementation. I was very impressed with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that with my mouse because I've been told
Hmm.
that locomotion in
Yes,
first person with a mouse is much
mouse.
less nauseating than with a
Yes,
controller.
because you have a physical input and then you get a movement, so you're able to accept it
It's
better.
the 1-to-1 or at least
Hmm.
a specific ratio of movement where when you move your mouse you know it's going to move a certain amount. Your brain can
Yep.
predict what's going to happen. But a
Yep.
joystick on a controller, there's like I don't know how many degrees of actual tracking they
Yeah.
have on any individual axis. I know like an actual big joystick like the T16000 is like 256, right? So
Yep.
maybe a small joystick might be 128 or 64. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
how much degree
But
they have. But if even if they've got only 32
hmm
different things, and even if the game only uses like in groups of 8 in terms of how fast you're turning, that's
yeah.
still like 4 different turning speeds that you're not easily able to predict by moving your
Yep.
thumb to a very specific place.
You're absolutely right.
So that
So
bothered the hell out of me, especially because I think because I was using the touch controller and
yeah.
that's got a trackball by default. So
Oh,
I was
okay.
just like whipping it around and then stopping, and I was like, "Whoa, that was really bad."
Yeah, no,
Um,
actually, that was one thing they mentioned with Star Citizen way early on was one of the explosions. The guy was what they had an early Oculus, like it wasn't official, but it kind of worked. And a guy got ejected from a ship in the Arena Commander and was spinning around, and he called it his instant vomit comet. Yeah,
there you
but
go.
so the other one I would try out was a tilt brush by Google,
That
and
looks.
that's
I
where
think
yeah
my wife would really love that. She's an
yeah
art
my wife
teacher, and I think
yeah
she would get a real kick out of that. I've been playing like the
yeah
janky version of that you can get in the Vive Home, the
oh yeah
Steam VR Home
oh,
area.
quill
It's just like in like the
yeah
little home that you can customize. There's this little
yeah
tool you can pick up and move around and paint with. It's just like
okay.
Tilt Brush, but then you can grab them and like move them around. It's kind of cool. But Tilt Brush allows you to actually sculpt something
Yes.
that stays. Like it's like the
Yeah.
Photoshop to the Paint.net that I've been using.
Hmm.
But man, Tilt Brush does looks really interesting because you can't even understand what it's like to paint in like 3 dimensions. That's
Yep.
crazy weird.
Yeah. When you do a
Um,
swoop around you, and you literally can, do a swoop around you.
mhm.
And then you and I have agreed to at some point play the Lone Echo.
Yeah, I picked up Lone
Yep.
Echo.
Okay.
So let me give a quick anybody out there who's read Ender's Game or who has seen the Ender's Game movie where they are in
Mm.
the battle arena with the base stars that are like stuck and everybody's floating in 3D around these physical things they can grab and maneuver themselves around, and they all have guns and they can like shoot each other and it'll freeze their suits, and you're trying to get from one team's trying to get to the other team's side of the 3D area. Um, Echo Arena is
Hmm.
essentially that, except instead of guns, you can punch people to stun them. And instead of trying to just get yourself through the other side, there's a disc that you're trying to like pass your teammates and then get into the other side. And the movement in it, I have to say, when I was first going through it, it's really good because and it
Mm.
works unlike movement in other because the motion sickness thing in other games usually comes from using a controller, as I mentioned. But in this game, the way that you move is you physically with your hand move
Mm.
out and what appears to you grab a piece of like a rail or something and then pull
Okay.
yourself backwards and let go, and it will propel you forward just like it feels so real. I
Hmm.
expected it to feel really gimmicky, like I wasn't going to have the control that I expected to. But no, every time I went and grabbed something and pushed off of it in a particular way, the result was exactly what I was expecting it to be. It's so tight. It's so tight.
Yeah.
And then you have these controls that are like little jets on your wrists. So like
Okay.
Iron Man, except reverse Iron Man. Instead of pointing towards where you want to go and
You
using
point
the jets
away.
from a palm, they're in your wrist pointing down your arm. So wherever you point your wrist and then
Okay.
hit the button, you start going in that direction. So you can like fly forward like Superman. like dun dun
Mm-hmm.
dun 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 dun. Dun. So if you get stuck in the middle of nowhere and you
Okay.
can't grab anything, you can use those. And then finally, you have a boost where if you're looking in a particular direction and you hit the button, you'll go in that direction. All of these are limited by a certain amount of fuel that recharges over time, of course. So
Mm.
that's just such a cool idea, and I can't believe how well it works from like the grabbing and pulling and pushing. And that game, Echo
Mm.
Arena, is free and it's multiplayer.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things is when you start, like everybody starts and you've got 10 seconds and you've just got 4 tubes on your side of the map, and you go in the tube and you grab the handle of this launch tube and then you press go right when the time goes down to 0, and it literally, like, the rail on the outside of this tube starts launching forward, and if you're holding onto it, it launches you forward, and right when it stops you let go and you shoot out of this tube at high speed towards the center where the disc is, and that's how the game starts, and it feels so great. All right, anyway, so Lone Echo, a lot of people will
Yep.
say the Oculus Rift and the Vive, these games just have like gimmicky things or some things that can be fun in multiplayer. Like Echo Arena is fairly unique. Um, they'll give it that, but then they'll say, oh, but there's no like real AAA, like long form story driven games. Echo Arena, from what I've read, is finally that game that people have been waiting for. It is
Mm.
using the same movement mechanics, because they've designed it and put it in both games, as Echo Arena, where you're grabbing things and pushing and pulling and you're using the little jets on your arm. By the way, I don't think
Yeah.
I mentioned you're an android within the context of this. That's why you can punch people to stun them and it's just whatever. They just get
I'm
better.
already very androgynous, so this makes perfect sense.
Ah, see what you did there. So I watched the trailer for Lone Echo. I haven't booted it up yet, but I've heard really good things about it from a lot of different places and people. But the trailer for it portrays it as there's a single human on this station orbiting Jupiter, and it's like a monitoring station, like a science station, and she's out there and she's about to be done with her 6 months rotation, and the android's job is like simultaneously to be like give social comfort to the person and be their extra hands, like, because the station needs a lot of maintenance and whatever, and you've got like these AIs and androids, so you are playing like a sentient style AI, and then like they start picking up some really weird signals, and there's like some weird gate opening between the station and Jupiter, and then like an alien ship comes through and all kinds of stuff is breaking, and then the trailer ends. So like obviously that's the beginning of the game. They're giving you the setup. Like,
You do.
so then at that point, whoa, something really interesting is happening here. Let's find out. And you have to, maneuver places and, cut open things with a repair tool and like repair them and do a lot more manual stuff than you expect with a mouse and keyboard are able to do, because let's get to this. The Oculus Touch controllers are phenomenal.
Oh, they're very good.
I
So I
have
have to say, I think Steam does a better job of tracking them than Oculus does.
really in
Yeah,
in
so
the Steam VR.
yeah, so when you look at it in the come here, there we go. So if you look at it, you can see there's a bunch of buttons on this thing.
Yes.
And so when you're actually playing, with the headset on, you'll look and you'll try to figure out like what finger or what button your finger is over. All right. And in Oculus, I was having a hard time figuring out exactly where my finger was, and I could feel out where it was. But in Steam, in the Steam Home thing, the VR Home, I was able to look at the control, which was rendered in the 3D space in the headset, and I could figure out exactly where I had to tap to get the button I wanted. It was down to that kind of fidelity.
Yeah, and let's talk about this. Something I did not expect. The
Mm-hmm.
touch controllers, every button is
Mm-hmm.
not haptic. What's the word? It's
Analog?
no, it's the thing that allows an iPhone to detect your capacitive.
Oh,
Capacitive.
right, yeah.
When you're resting your finger on a
It can
button,
tell.
it can tell.
Yep.
And that means that when you're resting your finger on the trigger, your hand would be like more like a fist. And if you have every finger resting on a button except your index finger, that's how you point and press buttons on physical interfaces within
Yep.
the game. And that little difference of being able to physically point with my
Yeah.
index finger in order to physically point in the game or physically press buttons with my index finger versus closing my fist to punch somebody, that's such a cool thing.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind when I saw that was happening. And it, like, your hand rendered in the game, like, sometimes they don't render it as a hand, they render it as a the controller, as you mentioned, but sometimes they'll render it as an actual hand, or in the case of Dead and Buried, a skeleton hand. So seeing your hand in the game feels really close to what you're doing with your hand. The only major difference is it doesn't track the two fingers, your middle finger, sorry, your ring finger and your pinky finger. It doesn't track those because those are always gripping the controller, which is where Valve's knuckle controller comes in. Have you heard about that?
I have not.
Let me pull up a
Now, bear in mind,
picture.
I actually had a chance to sit down and play with the Vive at a Microsoft store a long time ago, and that was kind of where I got an idea for how it felt. But I'd not had a chance to play with the
So
Oculus before.
the Vive comes with what they call the wand
Yeah,
controllers.
yeah.
The new prototype that Valve is working on that's been
Oh,
shown
the
off,
knuckle
the
grip
knuckle
controller.
grip controller.
Yes, I have seen those.
This one is a really, I don't know how it's going to work, but it's a
I
really
have
interesting
no idea.
idea.
Yeah, well,
Instead of having to constantly hold the controller, you have a strap that goes
yeah,
around like the main knuckles on the fingers, the one that you'd
yeah.
normally punch somebody with if you make a fist, those like
Mhm.
the main joint on all of your fingers. That's where this strap goes. And
Yeah.
if you drop the controller, it still stays there in exactly the same position in your palm because it's being gripped on by this controller. I'm showing it on the screen here. And
Yeah.
there's a better version of it, I think, here.
I want to
You
point
can see
one
the
thing out
front.
real quick here. If you have a PC that is several years old, seriously look at the minimum requirements. Because yeah, Oculus says it needs a 970 or better, but the CPU is the one that's getting me because I have a
Really?
CPU. Yeah, well, I have an i7 3770,
That's a
and like
third
for
generation i
yeah,
processor
I
from
said
Intel.
yeah,
So that's about 5 years old.
yep, right in there. And looking at Lone Echo here, it would like you to have an i7 6000 or better.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. I hadn't noticed any issues, but I recently had to get rid of my 3770. I think that's
Okay.
exactly the same processor that I had die on me, and I got a new motherboard and
Ah.
processor. So I got the newest. I think it's a 6770, sixth generation. That's the newest one. Um, or maybe not quite newest, but 66th generation. So I haven't noticed any issues, and I also have a
Mm-hmm.
970. And I have read that the Oculus is slightly better on system requirements in terms of the graphics card than the Vive version, than the HTC Vive
Okay.
is, slightly
Fair.
by a very small
Yeah.
margin. The like if you've got a 1070 or a 1060, it'll work fine on both of those. But the
Okay.
Oculus will have slightly better performance on a 970, is what I read.
Got it.
Anyway, so that's I'm very much looking forward to trying out Lone Echo.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and now Robo Recall is it's just a game you got to experience. And the thing about there's another misconception that I didn't quite understand. There's a lot of free stuff out there, and there's a lot of free stuff that comes with the Oculus Touch controllers. They ship like 4 or 5 games, including
Mm-hmm.
Robo Recall, which is really fun,
Okay.
and a couple others. Dead and Buried is also really fun. Both of those are shooters. The Dead and Buried one is really great. I don't know if you've pulled that up yet.
I've not tried it yet.
So Dead and Buried is like an old. It's about like this devil ghost, like Davy Jones. I guess he kind of looks like Davy Jones. Like is resurrecting your cowboy body from death and sending you back up as like a skeleton man to fight
Okie doke.
in the old west for some reason. And it's a bunch of different multiplayer mini games, and the one that I've played so far is like a duel. So you
Mm-hmm.
enter in, it's like the old school Jedi Knight. Do you remember those duels where you'd have a bunch of
I do
spectators and then
remember
two
those.
people
Yeah.
would go into the middle, right? So
Yep.
two people would be dueling, and you're sitting in the center of an old western town, and you're both standing there with your hands at your hips, waiting, and you hear the clock tower going tick, tick, bong, and then everybody they both players just grab their gun and try to shoot the other person first. And if you get a headshot, it's instantaneous, but it's certainly hard. And if you
Yeah.
get a couple body shots, then you can do it. You can also dodge back and forth. It'll track your head. You can't move much, but you can dodge back and forth to try to avoid having them hit you. And then everybody gets 3 lives, and after somebody dies, pop, they go back and they're spectating from like the saloon doors or like the up on the balcony. They're watching the next two, and meanwhile everybody's talking because they have built-in voice chat in these headphones. And I didn't realize it when I was first like talking to my wife the whole time I was playing, and people started responding to me in game. I'm like, oh god, I didn't hit a button. Why are they hearing me? Nope, it's just built in. Can't turn it off. Everybody hears you
Yeah.
all the time, which is
Yeah.
something I need to work on. But it also added an extra element to it because one guy was doing really well, and we started like coming up with like a pool, like, all right, $10 on whoever can beat so and so. Like it was just fun banter.
Okay. So
Anyway,
along the VR games that have potential, CS Digital Design has suggested the Unspoken is pretty cool, but wait for a sale. So thank you, CS. I appreciate
ah,
that. And then before we head out, I know we're getting ready to break here. Just wanted to give a shout out to anyone who's in Texas who was in the path of Hurricane Harvey this weekend.
ooh yeah.
The tie-in to Star Citizen, of course, is that their Texas office was closed down for the weekend ahead of the storm, which is smart. And hopefully, I know that Texas has seen record rain up to 50 inches in the state in some
Mm.
areas, which is, as a man who's living in Southern California, a number I cannot fathom when it comes to rain, in any way, shape, or form. So hopefully, all of the emergency personnel on the ground are able to handle it, and there's no loss of life or limb.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to close out by saying, do I recommend people pick up the Oculus for $400 right now?
Hmm.
I would say the reason I picked it up is
It was
because
cheap
I
enough.
wanted to play. It was cheap enough, and
Yep.
I expected to play A, Elite Dangerous, B, um, Subnautica, and C,
Mm.
Star Trek Bridge Crew. Basically, those are all things
Yes.
I will be sitting at my computer for.
Yep.
Because my understanding when I bought it is the room experience, which I've been playing around with first, is really fun, but
Yep.
gimmicky, and you're going to get tired of it.
Mm.
However, I think that my perception of that is at least partly changing, not least
Okay.
of which because a lot of the free games that come, the Lab is incredibly fun. That's the free one that Valve gives out called the Lab. I don't know if you've played around with that one.
Okay. I've not tried that
There
out, but I have
there
downloaded it.
is an archery game in there that feels
Mm.
so damn good. Like it's just a bunch of stick figures attacking a castle.
Okay.
It's basically like a
I
tower
think
defense
I've
game,
seen that.
right?
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
feels so, and it's so crazy, like detailed. Like they didn't need to go, but like when you shoot these guys, they'll pop into balloons. And if you
Oh,
can then hit the balloon, it repairs damage to your door. But the
I
balloons are
have
super
seen
hard
that.
to hit, right? So
That
and
was
then
that
there's
was
like
actually.
strategically placed barrels and things. Like I
Hmm.
wish there were more levels. I think that's only
Yes.
like the one level, the one design, and I just wish there were more because that's a super fun game. Bunch of other cool things in the lab that are fun to play around with. I would say just the free stuff that you get with the Oculus, including Robo Recall, Dead and
Yep.
Buried, the other free stuff out there like the Lab and the Wizard's Waltz. And some other crazy fun experience games that are free. All of those things have got to be at least 20 to 30 hours of entertainment,
Fair enough.
right? And then
Yep.
if you tack onto that things like Echo Arena, which is also free and it's a big multiplayer thing. You tack
Hmm.
onto that Bridge Crew, you tack onto that Elite. If you're going to be playing a lot of Elite, then this is then the thing probably is worth it. But now Lone Echo is the first and Subnautica was the other one I was thinking of is like a big real full game using it. Although Subnautica doesn't use the touch controllers, which I was a little disappointed with. It only
Yeah.
uses a
Yeah.
controller or a keyboard and mouse. Maybe we'll get touch in the future. Um,
Hopefully, or hopefully you can map it somehow in the Steam
yeah, I
control
think
thing.
they said the next milestone that they're going to have is just turning the touch controllers into the equivalent of a controller. But like I said, that made
Yep.
me super sick, so I don't know about that. Um,
Fair enough.
Again, maybe because I was using the trackpad rather than an actual joystick. So with that, yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Would you recommend somebody pick it up at this price right now, and who would you recommend it to?
So the reason I put it off for so long had nothing to do with the technology itself. It's that I hate Palmer Luckey,
Ah,
and yeah.
that's the
So
founder of Oculus.
it is, but now that he's been outed, yes, I realize he's still getting money from the company because, well, no one can control the shares that he has. He just has no more ability to guide or direct the company. Well, see, CS Digital, you say he left. The Silicon Valley rumors are that he was forced out, and he's gone now. So that's why I picked it up. And so I would recommend it. At this price point, I would recommend it at $600 for a Vive. I'd probably recommend it as well. It was 800 when I was looking before.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Now, I don't know what the Vive comes bundled with, but I know that the Oculus with Touch always came bundled with like these 4 or 5 games, and this one does come
yep.
with those, and those are really good.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a ton of free stuff out there in general now. So
my
what
un-
was bundled with?
yeah,
Yeah.
my understanding is that the Vive is better if you're going to be playing with glasses. It's got a little bit more room inside the headset, and the Vive is going to be a little bit better at room tracking. Its
Mm-hmm.
laser-based tracking system is better than the one, I guess, the optical-based tracking system that
Okay.
the Touch uses. I will
Yep.
say, I bought the third sensor and I got it set up in the living room with a 9x9 space, and the tracking worked 99.5% of the time. There were only a very few times
Okay.
that I saw it hitch a little bit when my body was in a very particular place, in a very particular way, so that like my body blocked the entirety of the controller from all 3 sensors. It
Mm-hmm.
was very rare.
I
Um,
can't imagine how my body could block the controller from all three sensors. I mean, if
yeah,
it's done right, you
like
got
I said,
corner,
it's
corner,
very
corner. Yeah.
rare. It was a very rare situation where it ever did that. So, but it
Mm-hmm.
did take a little bit to get it set up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so once I did, it was fine. So I didn't have a problem with that, but I have heard that the Vive Lighthouse things, you just put one in each corner and it can do a big room and you don't have to worry about distance. The thing I had to worry about is I originally set it up with the sensor further back so that I thought, oh, I'll just have a slightly bigger room. But then it said, no, 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 that's a little too far away. If it's any more than 9 feet away from the sensor, it's not going to be able to track as accurately. And I guess the Vive has a longer distance where it can track accurately, which is why the lighthouses can be, up to a 15 by 15 room instead of just a 10 by 10 for
Mm-hmm.
the Oculus. But to be honest, 9 by 9 that I made, way more than enough. It seems
Yeah.
like it's not enough. You're like, oh, that's not a very big room. It works fine. In
Yeah.
all the games that I played,
So,
it worked fine.
and I set up a 6x9. I've had no issues so far.
Yeah, I think even
Yeah.
if you only have 5 by 5, you can still work really well with it.
Oh yeah, I'd
Six
agree
by
with that.
six or greater, and you're golden.
Yep.
Um, so anyway,
So if you have 36 square feet, you can dedicate to not having small items strewn about around your feet. You'll be okay.
that's important. The other reason that I decided to grab it during this sale is that I have been waiting for version 2.0 of this, and my research suggested that we're not going to see a version 2.0 of either the Vive or the Oculus until 2019, and that's probably correct. Um, so I didn't want to wait another year. I was kind of hoping it would be this year and that the sale was them getting rid of their current stock so that they could make room for the new version. But some of the sources that I read suggested that is not the case, and that they're just trying to promote the use of the tools so that in 2 years when they launch version 2.0, they'll have a bigger base to sell to.
Got it.
So, plus I'm sure they had some streamlining in production costs
Oh, no
as
doubt.
time has gone on.
Yep. And then the rumor is that there is a second one in the works, although we've not really seen much about that.
Oh yeah, I want and I want to know about the Batman game. I have heard so CS
Short.
Digital Design said that it's super short, so
Yep.
probably not worth the money, but maybe keep it in mind for a Steam sale
A
or
sale.
something because it is
Or
really cool. It's just short.
or if someone sends Bridger a Steam gift card, that's Bridger 15
Yeah.
Steam. You can look him up.
Listen, I'll be happy if somebody who has Amazon Prime and Twitch Prime just subscribes to Bridger 15. That would
But
be all I need.
oh, I would do that, but I have Amazon Prime and I have Twitch Prime, but I have not actually tied the accounts
Oh,
together.
and that's too much work to ask. Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
It really is. It really is.
Anyway, it's 8:41. I'm gonna go try out Lone Echo,
Go have fun.
which unfortunately I don't have another $800 to spend on a computer, so it requires that I unplug the like two video cables and like 14
Oh,
USB cables and the
see,
Ethernet cable from the back of my computer under my desk in the dark, and then bring it upstairs and then bring it back downstairs for the next time I want to play PUBG. That's a massive
okay.
pain.
No, that sounds like a massive pain. I was gonna say I only have it on one computer, but I don't have a separate computer for recording. So or do you do all your recording
I do all my
directly on?
recording
Okay,
on this computer, so I had
okay.
brought it back down here since the last time I played it specifically
Maybe
for this recording.
maybe I should install my old 770 that I ditched and turn that into like my video capture card.
Ah, yeah,
Oh
that
yeah,
could work. All right, thanks for
hopefully. All
watching,
right.
guys. We will see you in a month. Remember, it is September 24th is when we're recording next, and you can find out more information at talesofshow.com. Have a good one, guys.
All right. Thank you, everybody.